Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. There are only a handful of emails that I get these days, and I immediately get excited that I've gotten an email with this subject or from this person. And I have to tell you, one of the emails that I look forward to receiving as often as it comes, and I genuinely get excited at seeing whenever it's unread in my email box, is any email from John Banzhaf. John Banzhaf is a professor of public interest law emeritus at George Washington University Law School. He's one of the most quoted, most brilliant activist law professors in history. Not only does he have an encyclopedic knowledge of the law, but in these regular newsletters that he puts out, or any article that he's quoted in, or whenever he's been on with me, he's able to make so much sense and explain it in a manner that even laymen like me really understand. But unlike a lot of well-regarded law professors, he's also able to comment on things like cosmic nudging, on things like how to stop airline doors or airplane doors from flying off in the middle of flights. He's able to talk about how when there's a shortage of ventilators, the use of things like CPAP machines. He always seems to have a creative way at looking at problems that are vexing everybody. One of the issues that he's been all over for some time, because unfortunately it keeps popping up in the news, and too often it seems like his warnings have not been heeded, is the issue of school shootings and how to, in this era where there are a lot of school shootings, as we just saw with Georgia, how to make sure that the damage, the violence, the injury, the death is minimal. How are we doing on the Banzhaf factor? That's one of the many questions I have for Professor of Public Interest Law, Emeritus at George Washington University Law School, the one and only John Banzhaf. Professor Banzhaf, it's great to talk to you again.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for that great introduction. Unfortunately, we are not doing very well, which is one reason why we continue to have mass shootings and mass deaths. And I think we learned a number of things from the recent Georgia incident. For example, I think it was a very good demonstration of the need to have very prompt armed response to gunmen. In this case, the resource officers were already at the school, were able to engage the gunman and neutralize him, which either means shoot him or in this case get him to drop his weapon very, very quickly. Whereas the nearest police were 3 to 5 minutes away, and you can kill an awful lot of people in 3 to 5 minutes, even with a semi-automatic gun. I think it also brought to everybody's attention, because I wasn't even aware of it, the so-called panic button alert system, which can either be a button on a badge, as it was in Georgia, or there are some systems which work from cell phones. But the idea of every teacher being able to instantly send out an alert that there's a shooter is important, can save minutes, and therefore save lives. I think it suggests the need for several kinds of legislation. We can come back to that. I did notice that although one of the doors at the school was locked, some of the other doors were not locked. The students and the teachers were scrambling to try to block them and barricade them with desks, but that usually doesn't work. And I think the problem why many of the suggestions which I made 2 years ago in an international report, very simple, very logical, most important, very inexpensive suggestions for reducing the toll, is that, number one, people tend to think in terms of grandiose national solutions. Let's ban guns, let's improve mental health, et cetera, or expensive remedies like having only one entrance to a school and having magnetometers or requiring kids to have transparent backpacks. I've got a dozen simple, inexpensive ones. Most schools are not doing them. They're not ready. They're not prepared. So we're going to have more of this as the year goes on.
I want to get into those, a few of those simple solutions in just a second. But in terms of what went well in Georgia at Appalachia High, the things that seem to have gone well and maybe prevented more death and injury were the panic buttons, the resource officers were armed, and the fact that there were door locks. Those are three things that are in line with what you're suggesting, right?
Right. There were some door locks, but bear in mind many schools can't have or can't afford or can't get armed resource officers. So in many situations, I think we have to at least consider arming one or more people who are already there, teachers, administrators, who already have a gun permit, already been trained and are permitted to carry their weapon concealed, and to have them there at the school, because again, even under best of circumstances, 3 to 5 minutes for the outside police to arrive can take an awful lot of lives. And I came up with a suggestion, by the way. If a school is afraid to allow even one teacher or one administrator to have a weapon on him, let those who have gun permits and who probably want to have them with them when they drive to and from the school, bring them into the school, lock them up in a simple gun safe down in the principal's office, and they're there, they're safe, but they can only be used if both the owner and the principal agree, open the safe, but at least you've got one gun campus ready to go. You're not waiting 5 minutes in a traffic jam on I-90 before the feds can arrive, before the local cop can arrive with guns.
You're listening at 30 minutes after the hour to The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano, talking about a number of issues, including the recent school shooting in Georgia, which, again, now that school's back in session, unfortunately, I suspect this is the kind of thing you're going to be hearing about a great deal. Professor Banzhaf has outlined about a dozen suggestions which would really help in terms of ameliorating the death, destruction, and injury in these shootings. All right, so we talked about having someone armed, whether it's a teacher, whether it's administrator. We talked about the importance of door locks. What are some of the other, we don't have to go through all dozen, but what are some of the other important suggestions that you'd make in order to improve the situation?
Well, I have made them after careful study. It's been published. The first one would be that all classrooms should be capable of being locked and locked from the inside, so a teacher doesn't have to go outside, turn a key, and risk themselves. You can do this literally for $15 a door. You and I've been in many cheap motels. Maybe you have. Everyone I've ever been in has that little sliding, they call them a latch, right, a horizontal thing that slides over and locks your door at night. We ought to have them in every classroom. We ought to have master keys. One of the problems in Uvalde was nobody knew where the key was. Every professor should have a key. Schools should have a system so that students who are locked in and hiding from a gunman and are afraid to make any noise and don't want to use their cell phones can text the information. They all know how to text. Text is quick. Text is easy. It gets you the results very, very fast. One-way peepholes. Again, the cheapest motels I've ever been in, every room has a peephole. I think every faculty office ought to have a peephole. There have been instances where people showed up at faculty offices. In one case, they shot the person. In other cases, they did other harm to them, particularly for professors like myself who sometimes work late at night or over the weekends and so on. They ought to have something like that. I think there ought to be simple magnetics on the outside doors. Remember, one of the situations involved a door which had been propped open. Well, for, again, $15 to $20, you get a magnetic sensor. I've got them all on my doors. If those two magnetic sensors are separated by more than an inch or two, it sends a Wi-Fi signal to my cell phone and somebody else's cell phone. Every school should have one of those. So all of these can be done for less than $20 each. And they're simple and they're logical. And who could object? Who wouldn't want to have a lock on a classroom door? Who wouldn't want to be able to text your school in case there's an armed person in the hall? These are logical, simple, inexpensive solutions. They're not doing them. But I think also the Georgia situation points to three possible pieces of legislation which we ought to consider adopting. The states ought to.
But in terms of your very common sense, very inexpensive suggestions, which are largely non-ideological, it's not a left-wing thing of, prohibiting all guns. It's not necessarily a right-wing thing either. But why have more schools and more school systems not adopted these?
I can think of about 5 reasons. One, I think, is that many people don't really think and believe in their hearts that a gunman is really going to come to their school. Yeah, it comes to others. No, it wouldn't happen to ours, so they don't think in terms of it. Also, those who do think in terms of danger think in terms of these what I call major national solutions, various kinds of gun bans, expand mental health problem detection and help, educational programs to help people control anger. Maybe they'll work, maybe they don't, but this is a here and now thing, and everything which I suggested can probably be done, if not over a weekend, at least before the end of the year. Some of them who, again, think it might come to their school think in terms of these grandiose solutions. Let's have bulletproof glass. Let's have only one entrance. Let's have it manned by armed guards, and they're going to have a metal detector for all of the 2,000 kids who want to come in at 8:30 in the morning and are fighting to get out at 4 in the afternoon. That's just not going to work. You've also got parents, and parents literally are spending $300 and $400 and $500 buying bulletproof backpacks or bulletproof inserts to protect their children instead of going to board meetings, school board meetings, and demanding that they adopt some of these very, very simple solutions.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes all the sense in the world.
Which is perhaps most important. A lot of people have visceral opposition based upon biases and traditional thinking. At my school, GW, although 70% of all universities arm all their cops, and something like 80% of all the major churches arm their cops, we have faculty, over 200 faculty, objecting to arming even a few of our cops because they don't like guns and guns are dangerous and so on. You don't have to be a gun nut to realize that if you want to protect something, you probably, particularly in this day and age, need at least somebody there with a firearm.
If people are just tuning in, I'm Frank Morano. You're listening to The Other Side of Midnight. My guest is Professor John Banzhaf. Lastly, on the Georgia situation, and then I'd like to pick your brain on one or two other items if we have time. One of the things that's become somewhat controversial is that the father of this shooter has been charged essentially for behaving in a reckless manner and purchasing him the AR-15 that was used in the commission of this crime. From what you know of this case, do you think that's an appropriate criminal charge here?
Indeed, and I would go further and suggest that we ought to pass laws imposing both criminal and civil liability if the parents are negligent, not because the kid goes out and shoots somebody, but if they did not take reasonable care, then I think, yes, they should be liable, and this may encourage more parents not to do the stupid things which were done here and in the earlier case. Along with that, I think we ought to have mandatory gun safes or gun locks, and nobody under 18 should have access to a gun. Now, some people object, I've got to have my gun for protection if burglar breaks in at night. I don't want to be twiddling the dials on my safe. Well, I've seen a number of gun safes where you have, say, 3 or 4 buttons, and you just push them in a standard combination, then you take your gun out. But the kid can't get to the gun, and yeah, you can do this at night, you can do this in the dark, and I've done it, and they in fact work. And then finally, I think Georgia did not have them. It might have helped here so-called red flag laws, which allow, if there is enough evidence and a judge finds there's enough evidence of danger, to take guns away, at least temporarily. That 3 pieces of legislation might save a lot of lives. And again, I don't think they should be controversial.
The other thing, and I know I said that was the last point about this, but I think it's important to mention, the other thing that you've stressed is that maybe, especially in schools where there's not a gun on premises, is the importance of something like bear spray. Speak to that for a second, if you can.
Sure. There are many places which, for a variety of reasons, will not allow anyone even to have one gun on the premises, even if it's locked in a gun safe and you need two people to open it. In such situations, I think, if not the school, the individual professors and the teachers ought to provide themselves with some kind of weapon. Now, there's bear spray, which will stop. They claim it will stop a grizzly at 15 feet. There are paintball guns, which will shoot reasonably accurately up to 30 or 40 feet, and they won't kill somebody, but you hit them in the face or near the neck, and they spray a lot of paint over his face, and that's going to be pretty disconcerting. And a few people have come up with a combination where you have a kind of a paintball thing which can shoot 30 or 40 feet accurately, and it contains not just paint, but various chemical agents, as you'd find in your various sprays. So these individual teachers can have. They are legal, so far as I know, in all states. I won't tell you that they're as good as a gun, but if you don't have a gun, it's a hell of a lot better than hiding under a desk or trying to put a desk up in front of a door to have these kind of things and to shoot. And also one advantage, if people are reluctant to have or use a gun for fear they're going to kill somebody, whether that's the shooter or an innocent student standing by, all of these weapons are non-lethal. They will discombobulate the shooter, but even if you hit an innocent student, all he'll do is get some tear gas in his eyes for a few minutes, and that'll be the end of it.
All right. Speaking of somebody that got in some trouble because of use of a gun, or at least ownership and possession of a gun, let's talk about Hunter Biden. In what came as a surprise to a lot of folks, he ended up taking what they call an Alford plea in his tax fraud trial on Friday, indicating that while he believes that he's innocent of these charges, he is taking a guilty plea to get this whole episode behind him. I know you've been following many of the legal issues surrounding Hunter Biden as closely as anyone. What's your take on where we are with this Hunter Biden case right now?
Well, it's pretty clear to me that's not why he wanted the Allen plea. The Allen plea also, obviously the Alford plea, also avoids civil liability. You can't go in and say, look, he pled guilty to all these gun crimes or tax crimes, and now we want to sue him. In summary, I would say his entire defense strategy, the timing, his appearances outside, refusing to testify, very bizarre, very strange, and very unproductive. If he wanted to plead guilty, he should have pled much earlier, and then he probably could have gotten some kind of decent deal on sentencing. As it is, they didn't allow him to take this plea. He took what we call a naked plea, and now he has no bargaining power, and he's probably going to be sentenced. The probable reason why he did plead, I think, is not to, as his lawyer claimed, avoid family embarrassment, but because there would probably be evidence coming out, maybe possibly linking the president to the money that Hunter Biden, his son, received, and that would have been very, very damaging. And a kind of a final wrap-up, I'm going to predict that as a result of this, Joe Biden, the president, is more likely to pardon Hunter despite the promises for a number of reasons. First, he's no longer a candidate. So there's going to be less harm to the party and to elections if he breaks his promise. Secondly, he can wait until the election is over, in which case it won't have any impact on the election. Third, what he can do, and I think he probably would, is make some kind of credible claim that there have been threats on the life of Hunter, even if he has to go to Club Fed, and that's reasonable. And then finally, I think the public probably would understand it's what most parents would do.
No doubt about it, especially any father and son as close as Hunter and Joe are, and who've been through as much as these two have been together and separately.
His other son and,
exactly.
Yeah,
no. I think it's
sure.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right. The other legal case that's gotten a lot of attention is the Donald Trump hush money case. Case has indicated that he's pushing off sentencing until after the election. Do you think that's the right move?
Well, under the circumstances, I don't think he really had that much choice. Mm-hmm. It is what the defense asked for, and the government didn't object at all. And in a situation where one side says, I want X, and the other side says, Judge, I don't care, do it if you want, regardless of what they were asking for, the judge would probably have to do it. And in this case, I think by doing it, he avoids any appearance that the sentence was done or the sentence was set or the amount of years or whatever was determined in any way by the election. Some have argued that if he was sentenced to jail time, it would help him. Some have argued that if he was in jail time, it would hurt him. The judge, I think, is saying, I don't know, I don't care, I'm just going to stay out of it. And again, if both sides basically say, yeah, Judge, we're happy with it, and one side demands it, you pretty much got to do it. Let's get some really compelling reason not.
Lastly, sir, we've talked a little bit about Boeing in the past, namely with your methodology to avoid near crashes or near collisions on runways. Boeing's in the news again, not necessarily for any airplanes, but because of the Boeing Starliner, where it seems like this is just another tremendous black eye on the part of Boeing not being able to return the astronauts back from the International Space Station. It came back over the weekend without any people in it. Do you have any thoughts about that whole thing? I don't know necessarily what my question is other than that. I'm sure you've thought at least a little bit about this whole situation.
I have thought a lot about it. It certainly is a very big black eye for Boeing, which already was suffering from one or two other black eyes, which I guess makes three black eyes. I don't know exactly what the problem was or how to fix it. In fact, the rocket did return safely, so the astronauts could have been on it, but I certainly agree with NASA's decision that where there's any doubt at all, you do not risk the lives of these two astronauts. But going back to what you started with, there have been, since we last talked, about half a dozen runway incursions. In one or two cases, the planes actually did bump into each other on the ground. Meanwhile, AI, artificial intelligence, gets better and better and better. So the idea of using AI not to direct the planes, but to warn the controller if something seems to be going wrong, I don't see why not. We use AI. We can get cars almost to drive themselves. We're certainly to the point where trucks can drive themselves. All you got to do is have a radio receiver which listens to the radio traffic. And after a month or so, AI learns all about the runways and distances and lengths and stopping distances and so on. And if it sees something getting too close, it can go beep, beep, beep and tell the controller. And the controller then would make the final decision. But the cost would be minimal. And nobody's even trying it. Actually, nobody's even thinking about it except maybe me and you.
Yeah, and that's why we appreciate the opportunity to have you on this program, because you give us all, me and the audience, the opportunity to think about things that would otherwise not be thought of. Professor John Banzhaf, it's always a treat to talk with you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you want to comment on any portion of our conversation, you can give me a call. Our telephone number is 646-720-0635. That's 1-646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.